Probably doesn't want me to touch it. Yeah. All right, fired up, ready to go?
Yes, everyone's in.
Perfect. Okay, thanks everybody for joining us. February 28th, 2024 board meeting. We're starting a few minutes late, but we needed a little bit of a break. I just want to acknowledge we're holding the meeting on the traditional territory of the Tla'amin Nation. So we have the agenda in front of us. I don't know of any changes to it. So can somebody make a motion to adopt said agenda? Director McCormick, seconded by Director Paul. Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. We have the minutes of the special regional board meeting from February 7th. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing no hands, all in favor?
I'll move adoption.
Okay, thank you, Director Falls, second Director McCormick. All in favor? None opposed, motion carries. Again, with the minutes of the regular board meeting February 7th. Are there any errors or omissions? Again, seeing none, do I have a motion to adopt? Director McCormick, Director Doubt, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries. Thank you. So we have 3 items of correspondence. And are there any business rising from said correspondence? I understand there is a request for support for a resolution. But seeing no hands, we'll move on to the chair's report. Okay, a little bit more happened this month, but I'll be quick about it. January 30th to February 2nd, we had the EA Directors Forum and the LGLA Forum in Richmond. I think it was just Director Gisborne, myself, and the CAO who attended.
Director Lennox.
Oh, of course, I'm sorry, Director Lennox. A lot of good sessions. 2 that kind of stood out to me were discussing the new emergency management legislation and the Fire Safety Act. And that's at the Directors Forum. And then at the LGLA, the new provincial housing legislation and budget basics. Because even though I've been through this 5 times, I think it's really useful to go back to the basics once in a while and just be reminded what the best practices are. On February 5th, the CAO and I had a Zoom call with 3 reps from the provincial government concerning the lack of engagement with the Qathet Regional District in relation to a dock management plan that is being developed further south down in the Sunshine Coast Regional District. With the announcement that the provincial government is backing off on proposed changes to the Land Act, I imagine the whole issue has been put on the back burner, at least for now. February 5th, I was also a guest at the Townsite Ratepayer Society meeting. They just wanted me to discuss the role of the QRD and Resource Recovery Center and to answer any questions. I feel it went really well, so I was pleased with the evening. February 12th, and I was pleased. I hope the people in attendance were pleased. February 12th, Library Trustees. It was a very short meeting. There was very little to discuss. February 14th, had the Stillwater Community Advisory Group. As Director Elliott will attest, most of the meeting was spent reviewing indicators, which are benchmarks that Western Forest Products must meet in order to retain a level of certification, which identifies them as a company that engages in sustainable forest management. It's something we do every year. February 20th, a number of us were guests at the Tla'amin Nation for their ground blessing ceremony. I was really happy to be included. For their new community cultural center, which we know as Our House. I apologize, I don't have it in with them. And it will be built in a traditional longhouse style. It will be used to house cultural artifacts. It will be used as a gathering space for community members and as a food processing facility. So I'd like to congratulate them on taking this initiative, and I look forward to seeing it once it is complete. And on February 26th, 2 days ago, I participated in an online strategic planning session for the library. It was quite short, especially as far as strategic planning sessions go, just 2 hours. So I'm curious to see what they come up with. Anyway, that's my month.
Thank you, Chair. A few things to report. On the 27th of January, I attended CPR training, which is put on by the Gillies Bay Volunteer Fire Department. And a number of people went throughout the day. Fernanda is going to be offering the same training. And I think it's great for everyone to have a refresher. I've taken this course a number of times before, but it's always good to have a reminder on how to do it in case you're ever called on. Hopefully not, but in case you are, you're ready. So I think it's a good thing. On the 29th of January, I attended a virtual meeting with Sunshine Coast Tourism. And they presented their Connect the Coast project, which we've heard a lot about today. And so that was my first glimpse at it. I met again with Sunshine Coast Tourism and the Northern Advisory Committee on the 27th of February. That was yesterday. And again, heard more about the Connect the Coast and also about some of their programs such as Sustainable Sunshine Coast and the Flavor Fest, which is a new program that they're working on both the North and South Coast, for the spring. So on the 31st of January, and again yesterday, I attended meetings at Tourism Powell River. And so I have some numbers actually from 2023. Their total retail sales, and this is the stuff that they sell in the Visitor Information Center, was $39,378, which is a really big number for them. There were 6,171 visits in the Visitor Information Center, which is certainly a big number. And I'd like to report that Tracy Ellis, who is the Executive Director of Tourism Powell River, has been asked to speak at a Destination BC conference in March regarding their experience with the Indigenous Learning program. And that is with regard to the welcome pole that is being constructed in partnership with Tuama Nation for the front of the visitor center, and also the language training that Tracy and the staff have undergone so that they're able to welcome people in the traditional Tuama languages. Tracy has also taken a crisis management course, which is meant to help visitors in the event of a disaster. If there was a disaster, an evacuation, etc., many visitors would show up at the Visitor Information Center because they don't know where else to go. And so Tracy has now taken that course and is prepared in the hopefully unlikely event that that situation arises. So Chair, that, I did attend also one meeting of the Tuxedo Garden Club, and conserving water was the topic, which is a big topic for everyone on the island, given the drought we had last summer and the drought that people are expecting this year. So Chair, that is my report.
Nice. Well, you know, it's strange, just a week and a half ago, I was considering saying I should go back to a CPR course again. So an accident up on Mount Washington, but I need to be better prepared for those circumstances, so I have to get that on my calendar. Director Doubt.
I also attended the ground blessing and the groundbreaking for our place that the Bowinn First Nation is assembling, and I think it looks like it's going to be a pretty impressive building. It's going to hold about 350 people for celebrations and dances, etc., and have a museum attached and an outdoor food preparation area. So it should be quite a community center coming along. So it was nice to be invited to share in that occasion and hear all the speeches that different people were making. And impressed by the cultural portions of that event where they had the oldest person in the community and the children were all there putting shovels in the ground and opening the place up together. So that was interesting to see. Also, the Supportive Housing Committee, Community Relations Committee for Social Housing, is looking at how it operates, and they've hired a consultant to actually talk to everybody who's a member of that committee and see if they can rejig the committee to be a little more effective on dealing with issues around the supportive housing. So I'm participating in that on behalf of the regional district. I also went to the North Island 911 meeting where we finalized the charges for all the regional districts over the years. No huge changes, but there were some fascinating things that came to light in the statistics for last year. It was the first time in a very long time that actually calls were out for the fire departments were ahead of the calls that we got for first responders. Usually it's the other way around. We usually get more calls for first responders, fewer calls but this year there were more calls for fire departments, and those came mostly from the Cowichan Valley area and the Peace River area, which are both contract providers that the North Island 911 provides answering to on contract. And those were all driven by either floods or fires. Both of them were elevated. When you have a flood or a fire, you get a lot of people reporting the same thing happening, but those were really elevated this year. Unfortunately, the North Island 911 has a contract for both of those organizations where the number of calls that are triggered creates more pay for the North Island 911. So it pays for itself, but it was enough to require an additional 2 people to make sure that there were enough people to staff all of the positions that they have. Another thing that we're looking at is next generation 911 is coming along. There's going to be a huge package of more information that's available when you call in and get a dispatcher for a fire or for an ambulance or for any of those things. It'll be able to operate by text. It'll be able to operate by video. And one of the things nobody knows the answer to is how much additional time that's going to take for the person answering the call to manage the call as it goes along. Everybody's waiting to see what happens when that actually is integrated, because if we're getting videos that are streaming and coming in over a long period of time, it's going to take somebody on the phone to be watching those and paying attention. So it's interesting, and what occurred to me is climate change is actually affecting us on all kinds of levels that we don't always think about. So in the cost of 911 service, climate change is affecting that. Floods and fires are actually getting to the point where they require management of emergency answer positions all over the province. And that's what's going on at 911. Fortunately, the cost is not increasing in any huge amounts, and we'll have that on the final budget report, I guess. Interesting times.
Okay, you mentioned the jump in calls for the fire department. I just made me wonder, are calls generally consistent from year to year, or do you see a trend that they generally rise? Or
they dropped during COVID. Number of calls dropped during COVID. And they've gone back up generally, but last year they were well above normal.
Really?
What we would normally expect.
Okay, interesting.
And really it was calls for flooding, where there was calling for rescue people, and calls for various fires that we had, particularly in the Peace River area. North Okanagan.
Okay, thanks very much. Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. So a couple of things. The Vancouver Island Coastal Community Climate Summit has been set to be virtual this year. It's going to be 2 3-hour morning sessions on May 6th and 13th. I'm on the planning committee, so when we nail down the exact times and send out invitations, you'll hear more about that. But if you want to mark May 6th and 13th mornings in your calendar to save the date, that's when our climate summit is going to be this year, and it'll be virtual. The BC Ferry Advisory Committee Chair Kim Barton-Bridges has been super busy talking to the media lately. She has they featured her in an article in the March Qathet Living. She's been on CBC radio on yesterday morning and this morning, and is going to be on a broadcast live from Powell River sometime in mid-March with Gregor Craigie from the CBC. And the issue is that BC Ferries has canceled their public engagement meetings in the communities as of last October, I believe, while we were at BC. And they haven't scheduled any since then, and they keep not scheduling them and having reasons for not doing that. So they're gone to the media to point out that they think it's an unreasonably long time to cancel all public engagement sessions and not replace it with anything at all. They haven't even really met with the advisory committee in any way, shape, or form as a replacement. And so Kim Barton-Bridges and the chair, what was her name, Diana Mumford, have been doing various media interviews, and you should be able to see and hear those. There was one yesterday morning at 6:50 a.m. on the CBC. If you want to go to those broadcasts, there was one this morning at 8:10 a.m. and there's an article coming out in the Peak, and another one. So that's happening. We're trying to shake the BC Ferries tree and get them back on track for public engagement, and hoping that this does something. So Kim's been really aggressive out there in doing that. And I support that because those public engagement sessions that BC Ferries is obligated to hold are part of their agreement and their contract, and they're falling down on that. So I did attend a number of events as well, was at the ground blessing ceremony and some other things, but those are the ones I wanted to report on today.
Great, thanks very much. I heard Kim yesterday on the radio. I
Yeah.
sent her an email, I thought she did a great job. Just as background, everybody here probably knows it, but yeah, down at the engagement session in the SCRD, there was a threatening comment made by an attendee. So BC Fairs decided that it was unsafe for them to continue them at this point without a plan in place, I guess. The individual who made the comment has apologized for it and all that, but I hope they bring the public engagement back.
Yeah, I was a frustrated senior citizen person at the Gibson's session. There was no actual violence. And they've had no meetings since, no plans for that they've shared to address any of the security that they felt they needed. It was amusing that in one of the articles, Kim points out that the city of Powell River has had much worse happening in their meetings, and they continue to have meetings. So I was quite interested in that comment. Yeah, some humor there.
Great, thanks very much. Director Gisborne.
Yeah, I was thinking about the same thing as, local governments, you see them across the province where there's threatening language, and they have the power to have the RCMP come and be present if there is challenges, but it's not an excuse to stop meeting and, doing your job for the public. So hopefully BC Fairies can step up. I attended the ground blessing ceremony, as was pointed out by the directors. And what I've been occupying a lot of my time this month is housing. So there was the electoral area directors forum at the end of January on the 29th and 30th. There was some great presentations on, the emergency response. There was the announcement about the secondary suite fund being rolled out, and then they clawed it back and things changed. Then there was the Local Government Leadership Academy. Sorry. And at that session, there was a great presentation by Bill Bohauser, I think is how I pronounce his name. And he talked about bills 44 and 46 and 47 and how they relate to local governments. And for something that's kind of important to the planning committee when we're talking about floor area ratio and building coverage for density, after he was finished his presentation, I had a nice chat with him about how could floor area ratio be utilized in relation to these bills. And he explained he's like, first of all, it's not a legal opinion, but the legislation is very kind of prescriptive to say, you can't use your powers to, have only one dwelling. You have to allow the secondary. So if you're actually redefining how you define density, then those provisions of the legislation no longer apply to you. And it's kind of like a way of saying, okay, province, like you do you, but we're going to go a different route. So that was an interesting conversation. Then later on that month, on the 13th and 14th, I attended the UDCM's Virtual Housing Summit, which was very interesting. There was a couple of items that came up in relation to like development cost charges and things like that. And there was a few other electoral area reps that were attending virtually. So we're of course messaging each other about which questions to ask. And one of the interesting ones that came up was, some of these amenity cost charges were saying, well, you can, when you approve a development, you can take money for recycling centers and solid waste management. And the question was, well, does that mean the regional district can pass a bylaw to tell the city of Powell River every time you give a building permit, you collect money for us? The question was asked, and the answer was kind of maybe. So it was not really a clear answer, but it seems to be one of those cases of where the province rolls out a bunch of these rules and changes without understanding that regional districts are one entity, municipalities are a separate entity. And, it doesn't really make sense that a regional district can pass bylaws to essentially eat the lunch of a municipality. But a lot of good information and a lot of discussion. And I think that's where our committee of the whole agenda item of the secondary suite letter came from Northside, was they were discussing that similar issue and around housing. And then this week on Monday, the what day are we on? 28th. On the 26th, I attended the virtual electoral area directors forum that was hosted by Geraldine Kirk, and there was just under a dozen of us, and talking about a number of issues that electoral areas are facing, and kind of an update on certain issues that we want to get more response, because the electoral area directors forum in person was wonderful, but there's so much information coming at us that different regional districts they're all different. So some are going like, well, this works for us, and others are going like how does this work for our situation? So Geraldine is doing a wonderful job, and I believe she's going to be getting back to us. And there was a discussion of continuing the virtual EA rep forum almost on a monthly basis. And I'm sure there's other things that I've missed, but those are the ones that are currently pressing. And I think that's it for me for now, so we can move on.
Good, thanks. It does get frustrating with new legislation. There are oftentimes new questions, many times fewer answers than questions.
Yeah.
It's just how it happens. Director Powell.
Thank you, Chair. It's been a bit of a busy month. Just after the last meeting, board meeting, our MLA, Adam Walker, who sits as an independent, organized a town hall on Lasqueti to talk about ferry. And it was attended by 79 people. It was held at the school. So you could say on an island with a small population, that was a very high turnout. 48 people were in person and 31 were held virtually. And he had the local government reps sit up front with him. So we all got to sit in little elementary school chairs, which was kind of fun. I was in the smallest one, so I felt some, flash to the past of my elementary school. And, we helped, and everyone, it helped to keep it calm, and everyone was quite calm. The Coast Guard amazingly came over, so that, we tried to get them to say anything, but they just watched. And the Marine Superintendent from Western Pacific Marine came over. So there was a lot of questions. It was for 2 hours, I think, and there were just was quite well done and very cordial. And the MLA came over with an entourage that included someone who would take minutes. So he's provided us with minutes. If anyone's interested, let me know. But a lot of questions came up, and that really gave food for thought. The ferry committee, the Lasqueti Ferry Committee, has also had several meetings with this new Marine Superintendent of Western Pacific Marine, and they've been getting better and better. There are certain things he can't do, and he's finding difficulty getting done, but relations are getting smoothed out. The operations seem to be going well. We understand each other better. He's had 40 years experience, so he's got salt on his hands, and he knows what rural communities need, and so he's actually at least hears us, even if they can't always meet things. But there's some movement in terms of giving people a better sense of the safety of the ferry, giving people a better sense of that the crewing issues will be resolved, and that we'll have good crew in place, and so on. February 10th, I was at the Vancouver Island Regional Library Annual General Meeting, which was held in person in Nanaimo. So I do get out on occasion to attend meetings in a body form, but that was very good. And the executive stayed the same. I attended the housing summit that Director Gisborne talked about, and I found it very useful. 2 days, it was well worth the time. And one of the most interesting sessions was one on, it was called Recent Housing Legislation and the Laws. So there was a panel of lawyers that talked about the various bills, each took one on, and it really helped lay out what is the really important pieces of this of legislation, and that's relevant for local government. So it was really good. February 22nd, I attended the Community Energy Association session on bringing resilience into disaster risk management. So they organized a lunchtime session to have someone from the province describe some aspects of the Emergency Act changes. And last Saturday, there was a CD Saturday at the Art Center in the midday, which was very well attended. And then in the afternoon, a local person organized a community forum to bring people together on Lasqueti at the community hall, just to start discussions about important issues. And so it was really just a brainstorming session, and it'll roll out over the next few months. And the issues that came up were transportation issues, wildfire risk issues, housing. So no giant surprises here, and a few other issues, communications on island, how to reach people and so on. So it was very productive. And with that, thank you, Chair. I'll hand it back over.
Great, thanks. Again, glad to hear you're making progress concerning the ferries. That seems to be a a recurring theme, not only that there are issues, but that you're making headway in kind of eliminating some of those issues. Last but not least, Director Lennox.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. In no particular order, I was able to attend the CIMAC meeting, the Savior Island Marine Advisory Committee. Very, focused group with a lot of folks that understand their marine facilities over there. Really good job by Mr. Devereaux to, keep everybody up to date on the latest happenings around their facilities and really planning for the future. So I'm looking forward to working with that group, the fire safety plan that'll be coming before us and all these good initiatives. So looking forward to that. Receiving a lot of emails. I always tell folks to reach out to me, emails and phone calls. Water study info that's coming up for Savory. There's been a bunch of feedback. I think it'll help us all as directors to understand water in general for Savory Island. Housing, Director Gisborne mentioned we've had some feedback about the, people seeing that we weren't included in some of those initiatives for housing and helping people to participate. So we're responding to them. Again, internet continues to be a definite need in my area in different spots. And with the recent announcement, people were looking for clarity, and I want to thank staff for really working on what they could release to the public at this point. And I think the synopsis that they gave is very good, and the Oak-Over ratepayers and other groups and folks, I think, got as much information as we could give them. So appreciate that. A lot of feedback on the road safety, especially because there's a lot of work going on out north. If you come for a drive, some significant, land clearing and other things to make that highway up to snuff. And then really some suggestions about what the future looks like about road safety. Active transportation comes up periodically, but how do we fit that in? Crompacher Road, obviously, we're having an upcoming public hearing on Crompacher Road, and so really just informing people, encouraging them to attend and getting their feedback. There's a lot of interest, especially from our London Community Society and others in the Northside Recreation Center RFP that we're expecting to be released soon, and getting underway with that project. And the EA Directors Forum and the LGLA, I did attend. I know I must have been pretty subversive there, but those events are really helping me to understand again things like budgeting, and as Director Brander said, how to really look at some of these topics with an efficient kind of open mind. So and lots of things that the other directors have mentioned around housing and the networking. That's been really powerful for me, and I appreciate Director Gisborne and others introducing me to other folks. And finally, a plug for first aid, Director Brander and McCormick. You'll never realize at that moment when you need it. So I encourage everybody to do some basic first aid. Thanks.
Thanks, Director Lennox. Could you, just out of curiosity, give me an idea as to how much improvements are being made to the highway north of town? Like what section, I guess, is being done?
Well, I did the right thing. Instead of just guessing, I phoned Mr. Parise with Moti and got a confirmation. The intent is to for our local crews to swale the road. What they're doing now is preparing the ditches and the roads and getting rid of nuggets to then issue an RFP for repaving the rest of the highway. I'll put it. If you know about the highway, there's certain sections that have been improved, others that haven't, and their intent is to complete that effort with the one kind of tough corner before Pryor Road getting paved, but then there's going to be some more work on that. In general, it's a really good news story for us to get to this point and improve safety for our folks.
It's a huge good news story. I hope that they widen the shoulders a little bit, because it's a scary one to cycle.
So do we.
Times. Yeah. All right. Awesome. Thanks very much. So moving on to the consent agenda. Does anybody have any items they want to remove from it? Director Gisborne?
Yeah, 10.5, number 5.
10.5.
Which is the grant donations.
Number 5.
Yeah.
I see no other hands, so can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended? So Director Gisborne, Director McCormick, thank you. All in favor? Great, none opposed, motion carries. So now we're moving on to item 10.5.5, now 11.5 or something like that.
We're gonna call it 11.1, Chair.
Just
Thank you.
11.1, there we go. Okay, and you have a change that you would like to make to that?
Yeah, I would like to actually send this one back to the Finance Committee. And I can do a quick quick description as to why.
Do we have a motion then?
Sure, that
we need a motion.
yeah, so to refer it to the March Finance Committee.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that? Director Lennox has seconded it. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Our electoral area grant and aids, like each one is a little different. And we had the discussion at the Finance Committee about the social planning service and where to reallocate the funds. So the motion of the Finance Committee was to reallocate the social planning service grant to the electoral area grants themselves. But upon reading the agenda today, the way it kind of works in my head is if we pass this motion, then when we have our next Finance Committee meeting, it's kind of like we've already kind of set the amount for each electoral area. And I think that when we get to our next Finance Committee, we might want to make some adjustments in terms of the electoral area electoral area grant and aid. And I would actually even be fine to split the motion and just send the first one back to the Finance, because the second one is very clear. It says that the board set the general grant and aid budget. But the first one it's kind of like it's setting the individual electoral area grant and aids, but it's like not really. So I just would like to have a bit more fulsome discussion on each of the electoral area grant and aids at the Finance Committee. If that makes sense. Because we're going to have we're still having another Finance Committee, and then we're going to adopt the financial plan at the end of March. And I think that we want to give a bit more thought and consideration to each electoral area grant and aid, the Finance Committee. Or does this, if we pass this motion, are we still then able to adjust the amounts at Finance?
I mean, that's the way I see it. It's just redistributing the 86,000 to the different areas based on the roll values. I would imagine we would still have a say in individual grants and aid, the total amounts, but I think we should go to Ms. Greenan for a more clear answer. Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so basically you're correct. That's what this would do is this would just redistribute $86,000 of the social planning grants to the electoral area grants and aid. And then at the March Finance Committee, the board will again be able to revisit how much is in each of the budgets and direct staff by motion to make changes to any of those budgets.
Okay, in that case, I don't have any issue. I think I was just confused because of the second part of the motion. So
Okay.
I'm happy to pass the motion.
So where are we?
I'll move it.
No, sorry, there's a motion. We have a motion for that's been seconded, but has not been stated by the chair. So if the members want to withdraw, I think that's still allowed.
Well, it sounds like we could just have the mover withdraw it and the seconder, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, I'm fine to withdraw it.
Great, okay, not a deal.
Now I will.
Now, of course, we have to move the original then.
Yeah, I'll move it.
Thank you. Now, seconded by Director Lennox. There we go. Awesome. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? All right. Again, it's perfect. Thank you very much.
Chair?
Yes. Kelly.
So item 12.1, which is next on our agenda, includes Powell Therapeutic Riding Association, which I am on the board for, but I am not on the board of all the rest of the one. I'm just wondering we should split that into two and handle them separately, or if I'm to be excluded from the vote of the entire motion.
Corporate officer, what would you suggest?
We could split it into, make it two separate motions.
Sure.
That's
That way I get to vote on some of them.
There you go.
Thank you, Chair.
So Yeah, you're gonna excuse yourself from the first one and then you can
Okay.
go back to the other one.
So yes, I would declare conflict on the first organization on the list due to being on their board.
Okay.
And I wore their shirt today.
Okay, so the first motion then is only looking at Powell River Therapeutic Riding Association.
Yes.
So somebody like to move that. Director McCormick, seconded. Director Paul, thank you. Any discussion? Director Gisborne?
Yeah, I support giving a grant to Therapeutic Riding Society. I just don't like the idea that we do multi-year funding agreements through grant and aid, because our grant and aids are typically seen as a year-on-year item, even though we have multiple multi-year funding agreements. And I would always be happy with kind of an alternative where we get our grants and aid package at the beginning, and it's like, here's the ones that we've supported in the past, we just approve it in the future. But I don't like the idea of going, okay, here's a 3-year funding agreement for a grant and aid, which is really seen as a year-to-year basis.
Okay. Any other comments? Director McCormick, and then followed by Director Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I take a different point of view. I do support multi-year funding agreements. I believe both for therapeutic and for the other groups coming up. It provides stability for the organizations to be able to provide the programs that they provide. And these are all great societies, but Powell River Therapeutic Riding Association, I have no problem with a multi-year funding agreement. I think it provides stability for us as well, Chair, because we then know what our financial commitments are to those organizations. And so that means stability for both the groups and the regional districts. So I do support multi-year funding agreements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Director Paul.
Well, I'll be brief. Director McCormick said most of what I would have said, which I agree with. The only other aspect is that in finances, stability and certainty mean you can get away with, you can have actually less. So organizations might be willing, and they might be able to make use of efficiently the grant funding that we're providing, not come in on the high side, but come in on the efficient side, if they have the stability and certainty that goes with a 3-year or multi-year funding opportunity support. And likewise, we would have that certainty too for our financial planning. So I support it. Thank you.
Perfect. So seeing, Director Lennox, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a quick question, probably for staff. Just when I'm thinking about multi-year agreements and what they mean, I mean, I fully support, most of the groups on the list. That's not the issue, but not that I would ever think this would happen. If we come to a point where we have one of our groups that, something may happen where we want to have another look at that agreement, are there mechanisms in place to that don't require us to kind of complete that whatever period, and we can reassess? Do you see my question in there somewhere?
I think I'll turn it over to Ms. Greenan.
Thank you, Chair. I'd have to look at the particular agreement, but I'm sure that there are clauses in there that allow us to open up the contract again and revise it.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Satisfies your question? Great.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so I just think going along that line, so what we're voting for is asking staff to bring forward for consideration multi-year agreements. And I'm assuming that when that happens, we'll be able to see the multi-year agreements. We'll be able to see what considerations there are for continuing them or for terminating them in the middle or for changing the amounts. So I think what we're doing right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, is just asking staff to bring forward proposals for what we could do for each one of these groups on the list. And the only one we're talking about now is therapeutic riding, but I think we'll do the same for all the other ones. But all the detailed questions we can ask when staff brings forward the proposals, and we can look at those details and be all ready to discuss how we like them.
Yep. Sounds like a plan. So seeing no other hands, I'll call the question. Ms. Green would like to comment.
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking at one of our agreements. So for example, just to answer the question more fully, the agreement that we have with Sunshine Coast Tourism, there's a section 5 that says the regional district may terminate the agreement forthwith by providing written notice pursuant to paragraph 18 herein if Sunshine Coast Tourism, for whatever reason, is unable to perform any or all of the functions set out in this agreement hereto to the satisfaction of the regional district. B, Sunshine Coast Tourism becomes dysfunctional and unable to conduct its activities in an efficient, business-like manner. Or C, Sunshine Coast Tourism otherwise fails to observe or perform any of the terms or conditions of this agreement in a timely manner. And I also wanted to mention that the board also has the option to amend an agreement, at any time that it would like to. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that information. So, seeing no other questions, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, motion carries. Director Elliott, come on back in.
Thank you, Chair.
Welcome back. So Director Elliott has joined us again, so now we are going to be looking at that list of organizations minus the therapeutic riding. And
I'll move that list.
Thank
The
you,
list as written minus the therapeutic riding.
Right, Director Fall, Director McCormick, any discussion? Kind of kicked it around already, Director Elliott.
I'll just have a brief thing to say because I wasn't here for the previous conversation. I generally like the idea of some multi-year agreements because of the stability that it provides the organizations and their ability to plan beyond the year they're in. My involvement in nonprofits means that I do understand how very stressful it can be for organizations to provide security for their staff, for their programming, for all kinds of things when everything's on a year-to-year basis. So I like this model and I'm supportive of it.
Thanks very much. Director Gisborne?
Yeah, I understand the stability. I'm happy to support these organizations. All of the ones on the list are worthwhile. I'm just still kind of hung up that, I think it's our policy that says approval of a grant by the QRD 1 year does not ensure that the grant request in a subsequent year will be successful. And some years we get a bunch of challenges on our side and, it's kind of like our hands have already been tied, our decision has already been made. So, we might have an election, you get a new board in, that's like, well, there's already a funding agreement for a number of these items. So I abstained last vote, which means I vote in favor, and I'll probably do the same this time around because it's kind of a challenge because I want to provide funding to all these organizations. I'm just not a huge fan of the multi-year funding agreement in the way that we do it. But I do recognize that it does provide stability and consistency. But of course, the world that we live in these days is anything but consistent is what I'm learning. So.
Okay. Seeing no other hands, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. 12.1.2. The board directs staff to amend the grant and aid policy to provide for the single grant intake per year on March 31st to begin in 2025.
So moved.
Doubt and seconded by Director Fall. Any discussion? Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really opposed to this recommendation because I think it's in the community's interest to offer 2 intakes a year, as we have done over the last few years. Community groups don't necessarily know by March whether or not they're going to spend money. And I point to the Seda Dragon Boat team, which I know I've referenced before, but when they got their boat out one year in April and they realized that the boat has significant deficiencies, repairs that were needed that were not going to be cost effective, they realized they needed a new boat. And in a situation, if we'd only had 1 grant in a intake, they would have not been able to access a grant from the regional district in order to purchase a new boat. So I say that because groups that are perhaps fundraising, I mentioned Chinches, the Texada Island Nonprofit Seniors Housing Society. They're planning a number of events this year for fundraising, although they don't necessarily know what funds those will actually produce. So in the fall, they may realize, oh, we're $20,000 short of our goal and we need to come up with that money because of other commitments. They also have no recourse in terms of accessing a grant and aid. So I think this does a real disservice to the community. I recognize that it's more efficient for staff to deal with everything at once, but it isn't more efficient and it isn't a benefit to the public by taking away a second opportunity for them to apply for grants. So I don't support going to one intake per year. I don't think it's in the public's best interest, and I would hope that we will not approve this change. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Director Lennox.
I think, yeah.
Sorry, Director Gisborne there. I guess I beat you to it. Thanks, Chair. I echo Director McCormick's sentiments. I'm trying to, make sure that we're looking out for the little guy sometimes around here. And without, I understand some of the negative impacts for staff and a bit of cost and time, but I really think that Director McCormick illustrated the point well that many of these groups, they struggle just to maintain their boards, maintain their structure. And then timing comes along, life comes along. A year can be a long time for us. We're moving quick, and a year seems like it's very short. But I think we have a responsibility to advocate for access for our communities, and this is one where we do good work for groups, and we need to give them a couple chances a year to get their organization together and come to see us. Thanks.
No problem, Director Gisborne.
Yeah, I'm opposed to it for a very different reason. I'm fine with a single grant intake, but I don't think that should be like a hard requirement. Like if there's extenuating circumstances, I still think that we should be able to consider those requests outside of the deadline. But myself, I'm not a fan of the March 31st date. I've now been involved in a number of nonprofits in the community, and quite often their AGMs are either January, February, or March. So they have an AGM, they get a new board, and they say, hey, what do we got something that we want to do. We got to break off into a committee in order to start planning the event. And then we want to put in a grant application, and we got to do all this in 2 weeks if we want to get our grant deadline in. I don't really see the benefit of March 31st really to anyone, because if it was several months before March 31st, then it would be a benefit to the board for us to get an idea of the need in the community so we can adjust our budget. So we can say, well, $96,000 for general grant and aid, but some organization is coming and saying, hey, we would like, $60,000 for something that is really expensive, but it's got a huge value. And then we could go, oh, thank you for letting us know. It's now March. We're going to adjust our budget, increase the amount, and that way we can make sure you get your money. So if it was earlier, and I think substantially earlier, like maybe sometime in the fall, so that way it kind of gives us an idea. And I know this sounds also even a little crazier, is to, be putting more money aside in our grant and aid, but not necessarily meaning that we're going to spend it. Kind of like having a reserve and making sure that whatever amount that it sits at, we just make sure it gets topped up to the same amount each year. So that way we can keep an eye on how much we're taxing our residents. And that would really only be a significant tax increase for the first year we implement it, and then subsequent years would just be maintaining that amount so that we have access to the funds in cases of emergencies. So I know the March 31st deadline is because it then aligns with the city's deadline, but the city's budget is due mid-May. So yeah, if they get grant requests submitted in March, and then they can bring it before their council and say, hey, we're getting requests above what our grant amount is, that would really help city council. But for us, I don't think it's all that helpful, because at that point, the grants of, the budget's already been set. So whether it was March 31st or April 5th or April 31st, I don't really think makes a ton of difference on our end as a board. It probably makes a difference on staff. But yeah, I also echo the concerns of other directors that, you know, does this single grant intake, is it cast in stone? And if someone says, hey, you know, it's mid-April and here's our grant request, that we say, try again next year. I think that is a bit of a disservice to the community, and I like being flexible, so. Just
Okay, Director Fall.
Thank you, Chair. You know, I hear the concerns, and I have a suggestion and maybe a question for Ms. Green. And you know, in terms of the date, you know, there is a reason for March 31st. It's outside our crazy budget cycle, and it lines up with the city date. Any other date in the year is more or less arbitrary. I mean, while some, you know, I've worked on it with a lot of societies, and the requirement is that they hold their AGM sometime in the year. So I don't think there is a pattern. I know one's in May, I know one's in September, I know one's in the summer. They are when they are. So if they have, if the ones that some directors are familiar with are in January, well, that's not a consistency, I don't think. But the suggestion I have, and I'm, you know, and leading to a question, is that if we pass this, you know, I think our challenges are around the grants that have shared contributions from different areas. And so there is a benefit of having one grant intake, and that is that we can lay out the amount of money that we are divvying up. The detriment of having two grant intakes is that we hold money back for the second one because we do not know how much will come in. And then what has happened on several occasions, in fact, probably regularly, is then we reduce some requests for some early, you know, first intake requests, holding for the second intake, and then it's left on the table for the second intake and we don't give it out. So there is a detriment to community groups because we're not giving as much as we could if we had them all on the table. So there is that. So, you know, when you have to put aside, if we did have two intakes, then I would at least want to say, well, we should pick some amount. You look at the last few years and say, okay, 10% is held for the second intake. And then we don't have that debate because we speculate without any information. But what I would suggest as a solution is that, you know, is that maybe if there is some flexibility to allow for applicants from individual electoral areas, because those applications, it's extremely rare for there to be significant debate around the board and controversy. If the money's in the electoral area's budget, grant and aid budget, and if the group is supported by the electoral area director, I've never seen us say no. So, you know, the question would be, would it be possible, maybe it's not, it would require amendments, but to deal with, to allow some other provision, either a separate date or, you know, dealt with on an ad hoc basis, to allow consideration of grant requests outside this deadline for grant requests from single EA grant and aid budgets. So like the Dragon Boat. Through the chair, that's a question for Ms. Green, and if she may, I don't know if she has any comments.
That she does, yeah, Ms. Green.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, the board could opt to stay with the second intake, and then and that's an option, is maybe if the board is concerned about you know, not having enough money, you could bump up there's lots of options. You could bump up the amount of money that you put in the budget, you know, by 10%, and then say we're going to hold 10% back for the second intake. That's an option. Or you could, like you said, carve off 10%. If you bumped it up, then you wouldn't have to worry about not having as much as you wanted in the budget for the first intake. I wouldn't recommend having people come in on an ad hoc basis to ask for funding. And the reason for that is that there's no guarantee then when the board, that entity might not know when that's going to be on the agenda. You know, if they came in July, then there's only a single opportunity in August. It creates difficulties, I think, for the board and for staff, because we have other priorities that are, you know, we have to set our work plans. So I would recommend, if you do want a second opportunity, that we set a date for that and that it's clear in our policy rather than an ad hoc.
Okay, thank you. And if I may just say, if I'm happy with the motion on the table, but if the directors who have concern want to talk about it more, perhaps referring it back to committee and maybe we could work out provisions. Because I think just leaving it as it is has the concern I raised about not knowing. And I think if we're going to leave second opportunities, there should be some parameters around that. So it's actually makes our job easier and makes it more certain. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I have a comment from the CAO and then from Director Bell.
Through the chair, I'm going to suggest that maybe everybody look at this from a personal money management type of view. We all sometimes, well, at least I do, keep a little bit of money aside for those rainy days because we never know when the hot water tank is going to blow. So I think what Ms. Greenan has referred to as, either topping up could be done relatively quick and swiftly, but it's going to be money management on the part of the directors when they allocate the money. And rather than an ad hoc and having a, knockdown deadline, what I would suggest is these items that come up out of the specific EAs are usually in an emergency case basis. And they're coming to you to see, have you got some money that might be able to aid our society, our club, whatever the case may be? And if you do keep 10% extra as a buffer, as a cushion, I think the board practically could deal with those entities as they come through. So I don't think you would have to do anything with policy. It would just be an emergency case basis, just as if you were managing your own money in your household.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Director Bell, and then Director McCormick.
So I'm in favor of the concept of having one intake a year. And the board can make a decision on how much money it distributes in that year, out of the money that's budgeted. I'm not in favor of saying, well, it would be nice to have two, so let's add another 10% on the budget. Because we just spent an entire day in the board eliminating things like $500 costs for different things to try to get our budget down and our tax requisition down. So I like the idea of one intake per year, March 31st, makes sense to me. Everybody can look at it, they've got time. And there will always be occasions, much as we don't like it, someone comes in and they say our community is falling apart because we need money for this service and we're imploring the board to do something. And if we have money, we will probably do it, because I've seen that happen over and over again, right? We've spent a lot of time talking about whether there should be one intake. I don't want to defer this and talk about all of the same considerations over again, because that's what we're doing. These are not new considerations from the last time we talked about it, talking about the same things all over again. Well, I'd like to pass this, have one intake a year and see how it goes. And I think people will be able to adjust to it. We will be able to contribute where we can to the community in a way that's financially responsible.
Great, thank you, Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a little confused by the difference between the Green's answer to Director Powell's question, that in other words, if we had one intake, it would basically be one intake and that would be it. And then the CAO's comment that if there was an emergency issue, then it could still come to us. So I'm not sure which is the right answer. So I guess I'm curious, and along that, in that same question is emergency is kind of a different kind of a term. Like if a group decides they need money for an event that they haven't decided on by March and it emerges over the summer, is that an emergency or not? And perhaps it wouldn't be considered an emergency. So I'm a little unclear as to, if we pass this motion, then if there would be an opportunity for community groups to come forward and what level of emergency they might have to have in order for their request to be considered. I'm kind of fuzzy about that.
Sure, well, I'll just give my impression and then you can either tell me I'm full of beans or whatever, but I get the impression we do one intake, but then the suggestion of the CAO was to hold back a little bit in your individual electoral area grant and aid budget. So then if the Dragon boat sinks, then they can come back and say, Director McCormick, is there any money left in the Area D budget for this sort of thing? And then you can bring it forward to the board. And as Director Fall stated, in most cases, those, in fact, he doesn't know of any case where that has been turned down by the board. So it is kind of a little bit of a parachute there for those circumstances that do arise. Am I getting the gist of that, General?
Through the chair, yeah, I think you said it right on the head. The key reference being that these usually come to you as individual directors. You guys can be the adjudicators. And I would suggest that at the next finance meeting, that each of you suggest that you add 10% to your EA grant and aids, knowing that you'll have at least 10% carried over after everything, all the dust settles. And if an emergency arises and somebody confronts you, you can say yes or no.
Great. Okay. Director Gisborne. Okay, well,
let Director McCormick finish.
Director McCormick's already spoken twice, I believe. I think you've spoken twice as well.
Once, I believe.
Once, okay, go for a second time.
Oh, thanks, Chair.
You know what, I'm gonna interrupt you just for a moment, because Ms. Green had her hand up, I may be able to clarify something.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify that if the board does want to leave a 10% or some kind of a buffer aside, then that we don't take out the second intake, that we leave the second intake in there.
I gotta say, I'm a little confused by that. I mean, why would, can you clarify, would it be necessary just to have an extra 10% put in our EA budgets? Why would we keep the second intake in place?
Thank you, Chair. I was thinking that the idea was that you would increase it by 10% and then save that 10% and not dole it out in the March intake. So then you'll have that second, that 10% sitting aside. So if someone has an emergency, then they could come and ask for that. The only concern I would have about not having a second intake and then having, funds sitting there waiting for people on an ad hoc basis is, we might get an application in July, August, September, October, November, December.
But it's my understanding those applications would go straight to the electoral area director, and then they would bring them to the board. So anyway, we're going to move on here. Mark, and then I have Director McCormick, and then I have Director Elliott, and then Director Bell. Okay, we have a lot of.
Oh,
okay, you know what? Let's go to Cindy first, or Director Elliott first. She has not spoken yet.
Thank you, Chair. So been listening a lot, and I am not in favor of a single intake. And the idea that you would have a single intake and still accept applications afterward doesn't give equitable access to all the emergencies that might be. It just kind of favors the first guy in the door and after March 31st. So I won't be voting in favor of this. I've spoken against it in previous meetings too. I think the flexibility for communities to have more than one intake is worth the effort we put into it. It's been working really well. It's what people in this region are used to, and I don't think, changing it could have, consequences to really small organizations that are, catastrophic for those organizations. I like what we're doing now. I don't really see the bite being worse than whatever. I think I'm not in favor of the change. And this other idea where you could hold money back and maybe give it out if there was an emergency, I think that just encourages people to send applications in willy-nilly whenever they want to, and then you have to decide if that's the right one, or there's going to be a worse emergency 2 months down the road. I don't think that's a good idea at all. So.
Okay, Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. And my apologies, I got a bit of a headache. This has been going around in circles. We're now talking about like a 10% increase to the grant and aid before I had an item removed from the consent agenda, about electoral area grant and the general grant and aid. And we just passed a motion setting our general grant and aid at $96,000. So now we're talking about increasing it by 10%. Are we only talking about increasing electoral areas by grant and aid in the future? But we're gonna leave the general grant and aid as is. And I think this is the kind of thing that we want to talk about as a finance committee to really understand what it is we're talking about. And this was before my time, but I believe Director McCormick was at the table when this happened. It's great if we can put a buffer into our grant and aid, and that we can all be respectful, and that we can all say, look, this is, how we do the proper funding. However, what happens in practice is we get requests that exceed what's available. And we go, well, general grant and aid has been tapped out. Where else can we get the money from? Well, we'll take it from social planning. We'll take it from something else. And I do recall meeting many years ago where there was a grant request, but there wasn't enough money in the grant and aid. And Area C at the time was completely tapped out. And they were taking money from Texada's grant and aid because there was still a little bit of money left over. And I recall calling going, well, there's nothing left. And I recall, I think it was Director McCormick that was very unhappy with what was happening there. And therefore, as a result, over time, the practice has become, we allocate just enough and then that's it, because otherwise we start robbing from Peter to pay Paul. And that's where I have a bit of an issue where if we want to increase the electoral area grant and aid so that we can have flexibility for multiple intakes, then we also need to increase the general grant and aid so that way that flexibility is fair. Because otherwise we're going to end up in the same situation where there's an initiative that comes in and says this benefits the whole region, but there's not enough money in general grant and aid to provide it. We start taking money from the electoral areas to pay for it, because that's what keeps happening. And it's not something I think we agree with, but that's a result of the decision that we make in a budget period. And then several months later, we say, oh, we didn't realize that there was going to be such a big request that far exceeds what's available. And that's the reason why I don't like the March 31st deadline, because we're passing a budget and we don't know what the requests are going to be and for which areas, because we've got 5 electoral areas and a general grant and aid. So there's 6 pools to pull from. We might increase one, but a request comes in that we start taking from Peter to pay Paul, or in this case was taken from Texada to something. I don't even remember what it was. I just remember that it wasn't fair.
Okay, I think we've heard quite a bit here. I don't believe Director Bell has spoken yet. Is that right? Or
I've spoken way too many times already.
Okay, are you giving up your chance to speak, or?
I'm done talking.
Okay, I know Director McCormick, you've had 2 times to speak now, so a 3rd time, and you're gonna wrap it up quick, yeah?
Yep, I will, just to say that I don't support adding 10% to the budget on speculation that tax dollars that we're charging people for, which may not get spent. So we're overtaxing them in that case. If we don't allow a second intake, then that is doing a huge disservice to the community groups who may genuinely come forward. And maybe it isn't an emergency, but they need funding for a particular project. So I would like to keep what we're doing. I think it is working well, and I don't support going to a single income.
Okay.
Thank you.
I move referral to the finance committee.
Is there a seconder? I see no seconder. So we have the motion in front of us. I'm gonna call the question. We're going on the table a lot. All in favor? I have 2 in favor and opposed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 opposed. The motion was defeated. Item 12.2, financial plan draft 3. Item 1. The board directs staff to remove $2,500 for photographs for the 2024 general administration budget. Item mover.
So moved.
Gisborne and McCormick, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Item 2, 2,000 for the road shows. Do I have a mover? Director Gisborne, seconded by Director McCormick. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? I'm gonna oppose that one. Motion carries. Item 3.
So moved.
Increase Shelter Point Hayward Bay camping fees. Director McCormick, Director Gisborne moves it, seconded by Director Lennox. Any discussion?
We're gonna find out.
Director Gisborne.
Oh, my understanding is we're gonna find out further about proposed increases to camping fees before we actually make that decision final. So for anyone watching, we're not actually saying the camping fees are going up. We're saying we want that information, and then we'll make that decision for the increase. Is that correct?
It sounds to me like they're increasing. It's just how much they are. Director Corporate Officer.
That would come through a bylaw amendment or a fee and charges bylaw.
Perfect. Thank you. Seeing no other hands, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carried. Item 4. $9,333 and extended replacement of ortho photos from 3 to 5 years.
So moved.
And seconded by Director Doubt. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Going down. Yes, Director Gisborne?
Yeah, I'd like to move an alternative motion on 12.3. It's a similar motion, but the dollar amount would be $234,500.
Sorry, I shot right past that one. You know that?
Recreation complex.
234,500.
Yes.
Do we have a seconder for that? Director Lennox. Thank you. Any discussion? Director Gisborne.
Yeah, this is just setting a dollar amount for the budget. It doesn't actually mean that we'll provide the funding to the recreation complex because we still have to go through that kind of negotiation and discussion with the city of Powell River. I am still very unhappy with how the lack of communication between the elected officials has occurred, but I think it is a sign of good faith to put forward a number that is reasonable and based on the funding formula that was adopted by referendum. And that funding formula was based on floor area ratio, which was, I think, 32.5% of the total area. Population ratio, which using the updated census works out to roughly 25.7%, and also multiplying that by the operational costs of the city of Powell River, which based on their November staff report came out at 2.787 million. Multiplying those all together gives a value of $232,948. But then on our current budget, we also allocate $1,500 for administration. So rounding up gives us a value of $234,500, which I think is in line with the funding formula that was approved by referendum. So that's where the number came from, but I'm sure our staff can go through it in greater detail.
Okay, any discussion? Director Lennox, followed by Director Fall.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and I appreciate Director Gisborne doing the homework for this because I was going to make an alternate motion to basically follow the path that we've been following for several years, the increases that we have been, that have been approved in the past, and just to, as our CAO and others have said, give us that runway to have fulsome discussions with the city on this topic. So I actually appreciate that Director Gisborne has taken the time to kind of bring us up to date with the latest costs and other factors that give us a little bit more accurate numbers. So I'm in favor of this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Fall.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question actually about the voting rules. And my understanding is that it's all directors because this is trying to make a change to the budget, which will be adopted by the whole board versus just the participants in the sub-regional recreation service, because it's not actually a change to the service other than the taxation. Is that a correct understanding?
Corporate Officer.
Yes, thank you. You're correct there. This vote would occur under Section 210 of the Local Government Act.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, Director Gisborne.
I have a question. Does our service establishment bylaw not state that for the sub-regional recreation contribution service that all the voting will be done by just the 3 participants and that won't be any weighted votes?
Corporate Officer.
Yes, thank you through the chair. That's in relation to voting under Section 209 of the Local Government Act, administration and operation of the service. And that's where you're able to set participant votes as weighted or not weighted. So you're correct. I do believe that under sub-regional recreation, each participating area has one vote.
Okay, so in order to get it to where only the 3 participants have it, we would have to amend the service establishment bylaw. Is that understanding correct?
No. Sorry, thank you.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair. So that level of voting is only under administration and operation of the service. When you are feeding the budget, that requires an all of the directors weighted vote. So under 210, I think you're referencing a section 209 vote.
Okay.
Which is not what this would fall under.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, so we have 1 opposed. Motion carries. Moving on to bylaws. Myrtle Pond Water Service Capital Inclusion Charge Bylaw number 579/2022. Can I get somebody to read that for me?
Sure, that the board give third reading of Myrtle Pond Water Service Capital Inclusion Charge Bylaw number 579/2022.
Thank you. And this is all directors unweighted. Seconded by Director Fall. I think I saw his hand up. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Opposed, motion carries.
That the board adopt Myrtle Pond Water Service Capital Inclusion Charge Bylaw number 579/2022.
Seconded by Director Fall. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to 14.2 Northside Fire Protection Service Area Amendment Bylaw number 213.5. Would somebody like to read that?
If somebody else could read it, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
I'll move that the board give first and second reading of Northside Fire Protection Service Area Amendment Bylaw number 213.5/2024.
Second by Director Elliott. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries.
I move that the board give third reading of Northside Fire Protection Service Area Amendment Bylaw number 213.5/2024.
Seconded by Director Elliott. Any discussion? All in favor? None opposed, motion carries. And
I move that the board adopt Northside Fire Protection Service Area Amendment Bylaw number 213.5/2024.
seconded Director Elliott. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Item 14.3, Muscogee Island Fire Protection Service Area Amendment Bylaw number 341.4/2023.
I move that the board adopt the Muscogee Island Fire Protection Service Area Amendment Bylaw number 341.4/2023.
Seconded by Director McCormick. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. 14.4 Waste Management Conversion and Service Establishment Amendment Bylaw number 523.1/2023. Someone would like to read that for me?
I move that the board adopt the Waste Management Conversion and Service Establishment Amendment Bylaw number 523.1/2023.
Seconded by Director Doubt. Any discussion? Director Doubt?
So this,
Sorry, were you seconding it first?
I didn't intend to, but I'll second it.
Oh, you do, okay.
Somebody probably will.
Yeah.
My question was that I think this is the stage where all of the required participants in the service, or at least 2/3 of them, have silently agreed with the change. That's why it's gone to the Director of Municipalities. And which participants signed?
Corporate officer?
Thank you very much. I don't have that information offhand, but I do believe it was the electoral area directors, because the municipal directors aren't authorized to sign. The council would provide that authorization.
That was the direction I was going with my question, is I believe that if the municipality as a participant was to sign, it would have had to come as a motion to council, and that didn't happen. So I didn't think the city as a participant could have signed. So that was my question. I thought that was the answer. all the electoral area people sign. Thanks.
Great. Any other discussion? Director Gisborne?
Yeah, for something as important as waste management conversion and service establishment amendment bylaw, do we have a major time requirement to get this passed at today's meeting, or can it be done prior to adoption of our budget at the end of March?
I'm not sure whom to address that to.
Thank you through the chair. I would recommend Linda Green, Manager of Financial Services. I do know that there was a time component associated
Oh,
with
there's
this.
it. Okay. Ms. Greenham, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as long as this is approved before the budget adoption deadline, then that would meet the requirements of legislation.
Okay,
Thank you.
well, after hearing that, I'm happy to sign as long as all the other participants sign. And out of respect for the city council, I would actually be inclined to wait until the next board meeting at the end of March and give the city the opportunity to look at it and sign it, which I hope they will. I know it's not required, but it's just part of being a good neighbor. So I saw Director Elliott had her hand up, but I would be willing to put forward a motion that we postpone this to the board meeting at the end of March.
Okay. Do we have a seconder, or would you like to hear from?
I'd like to hear from Director Elliott first. Yeah.
Okay.
Just a question.
Okay.
It says, and whereas the written consent of at least 2/3 of all the participants in the service area has been obtained in accordance with the Local Government Act. How is the 2/3 determined? Is that by population?
Corporate officer?
Thank you. So in this, there are 6 participants. It's not by population, it's by, so we have 5 electoral areas and the city of Powell. So there would be 6 participants in this service.
Okay, so the city of Powell can only sign
As
through
one.
the city over there, and that's not decided here. And 2/3 would be not by population, just by the votes of the electoral areas. So why is the vote all directors unweighted if the city isn't represented in that vote? I'm confused by the process, I guess. So this bylaw is being enacted without the city, basically.
Sorry, no, I don't believe so.
Well, because it hasn't been before the city for them to sign, and in fact, you don't, right? If it's signed by the area directors, that's more than the 2/3 that you need. So it seems like it's possible to enact this without the city's participation. I don't know if that makes any sense. My question is how do we make sure the city gets a say?
Oh, thank you through the chair. So that's just a procedure that is established through legislation to ensure that that 2/3 of the participants want to proceed with this change to the service establishment bylaw. That's the metric that is required by the province. That doesn't, if that's not met, then they would ask for further there. With regards to adopting the bylaw, the way that the appointed municipal directors participate is by casting their vote in favor or not in favor.
Okay. So then, as my comment, then I would not be in favor of voting for this until the city had had a chance to debate it at their council.
Okay, Director Dow.
Okay. Well, I understand that once all the participants have had an opportunity to say whether they agree or not, which we've already told the provincial government we do, then the vote is between the directors of the regional district to finalize the bylaw. And my question was the city ever given an opportunity as a participant to agree to participate?
Thank you through the chair.
Okay, so that's a real specific question. All of the electoral areas, if 2/3 have agreed, must have signed at least 4 out of the 6 people.
Yes.
Or 4 of the 5 must have agreed. So was the city ever given an opportunity to do that? Or was it just the city just not asked?
Thank you through the chair. So once we met the measure required by the province, we just proceeded with sending in the bylaw package, which has been the standard practice. So once we meet that measure of 2/3 majority, we proceed with that. We could forward it for consideration. However, it has already received approval. And we do communicate to the province, like in this instance, we would have communicated that that we did not receive approval from the city of Powell River because we had met 2/3 majority.
Well, I'll just comment that I was surprised that the city wasn't approached and given an opportunity to agree.
Okay. Director Gisborne.
Yeah, I would like to refer this to the March 28th board meeting and that it be referred to the city for their opportunity to sign, if that makes sense. I know it's not required, but I think it's respectful.
Okay, do we have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Great, Director McCormick. We have any discussion on referral, I guess?
I think.
Yeah.
Pardon? Yeah, we would have discussion on it. I'm just.
With that, I have one question for Ms. Green. That would still give us enough time at by the March 28th meeting to meet any deadlines? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. It would have to be adopted before March 31st to meet our deadline for the budget. So if we don't adopt this by March 31st, we would have to rethink our plan for the waste management service.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I have Director Dowd and Director Gisborne.
I'm not trying to speak too many times, but I think it would be respectful to give the city as a participant in the service the opportunity to discuss it as a group and make a decision. I know that the city's decision won't make any difference because the ministry, as appropriate, has already received 2/3 of the participants' agreement. But I think it's simply respectful to have all of the participants offered an opportunity to accept or reject. So, and I think there should be time to do it. And as a city councilor, I can put some pressure on people to get it done at the city in an appropriate time. You know, thinking of all of the different time limits that everybody has. I think it would be a respectful thing to do.
Okay, thank you. Director Gisborne?
Yeah, and I'd like to thank the municipal directors for pointing this out. And I'm just thinking, this is why I put forward the motion to refer and get the city's input, is I always think about, treat others the way you wish to be treated. And I just know that if, there was a signatory for the service that Area B participated in and I didn't get the opportunity to sign, and it was already done and sent off, I would be fairly irked. So I would just like to make sure that the city gets the opportunity that I hope that I will have for any potential service changes or bylaws that, and I know it won't really make a big difference at the end of the day, but this will at least give the opportunity for the municipal council to look at it, to understand it, because otherwise, you might get some issues and friction between the relationship of the regional district and the city council as a whole. So I'm very happy to refer this to March 28th, and hopefully city council has a fulsome discussion.
All right, well, let's press on and call the question on whether to refer this to the March 28th board meeting. All in favor? Any opposed? I see none. Director Lennox, is that in favor or opposed? Just two opposed.
In favor, thank you.
In favor? Who is opposed? Just okay, none opposed. Motion carries. That's it. New business. Question period. Mr. Galinsky.
Hello, Chair Galinsky from the Peak here. With regard to item 12.3 Powell River Recreation Complex funding, I was just hoping to confirm the figure that Director Gisborne had put forward, which I believe was $234,500. Through the chair, is that correct?
You would be correct.
I thank you for the opportunity to pose that question, Chair.
Sure. Seeing no other questions, we have a proposed closed session. Somebody read that.
I think I can do it.
Good.
I move that the board move in camera, the meeting be closed to the public on the grounds that the subject matter to be considered relates to matters covered by the community charter under section 91A, personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the regional district, or another position appointed by the regional district. C, labor relations or other employee relations. K, negotiations and related. I'm sorry, I got the hiccups. Negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a regional district service that are at their preliminary stages, and that, in the view of the board, could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the regional district if they were held in public. L, discussions with regional district officers and employees respecting regional district objectives, measures, and progress reports for the purposes of preparing an annual report under section 98, annual regional district report, and M, the consideration of whether a board meeting should be closed under provision of this subsection or subsection 2.
Seconded by Director McCormack. All in favor? Not opposed, motion carries. Going in favor. I think we lost Director Lennox.
Chair, we were going to do this again without the CEO.
All right, are we live?
We are back in open session.
Okay, thanks very much. The board would like to rise and report on the following. Declare Trevino was submitted to the BC Ferry Authority for consideration for the Central Vancouver Island and Northern Georgia Strait Area Director position. And with that, we are adjourned. Thanks for being here.
Night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Jason.
Give me a call.